Ladies and gentlemen, my name is slicedlime, and this is an overview of the changes in the Minecraft Snapshots 15w32a, b, and c. I know this video is a bit late, I have been out of town, and as a result I could only record this just now, but I asked in the previous video and I got requests to record it anyway, even if it's late. So today is Sunday, 9th of August, and this week Mojang has again released a full snapshot and then 2 bug fix snapshots on Wednesday, Thursday and Friday. So this video is going to be an overview of all 3 of those snapshots because there's actually quite a bit of new stuff in them. So let's dive right in. The first change that you will notice in these snapshots is that the world selection screen has gotten a bit of an overhaul. There's now a version next to each world where you can see which version of the game generated the world file. If the world was generated previous to this version, then it will say unknown. And in addition to this, if you hover a world that was generated in a previous version, then the game will display a warning message telling you that you should back up your world before opening it in the snapshot. Good advice. This version is stored in a new data version field in the level data, which the Mojang developers warned against ever changing, but of course immediately some mapmaker found a good use for it. That is just the way things go. Together with this change, we also have new thumbnail icons on the world files. These icons are generated when your world is first started up and then remain until the end of days, unless you use another new feature, which is the edit button. This was previously the rename button, but now leads to a new edit screen where you can reset the icon and make it regenerate. It also has a handy button to open the world folder for the world. And in that folder, if you want, you can customize the icon, which is stored as a 64x64 PNG file called icon.png. Another interesting thing with this screen is that they've switched the places of the save and the cancel buttons. Funny thing is though, they don't seem to have switched the functionality, so in order to save your level, you actually have to currently press cancel. As for joining in your old world, Mojang has also done some work on the upgrade path. That is, what happens when you open your old world in a new Minecraft version. The dragon used to automatically respawn when you did this, and that is now supposedly fixed. I haven't verified that for myself. And there was also a problem with all the potions turning to water bottles. So as we get more and more snapshots towards Minecraft 1.9, we get a better and better upgrade path to your old worlds that you have made before and that you want to keep playing on in this new version. Of course, there are also fixes after you actually join in your game. Let's start with the mobs. Zombies, skeletons and creepers now have a harder time seeing you if you wear a mob head of the appropriate type. This means that zombies are half as likely to spot you if you're wearing a zombie head as a helmet. There's also a bunch of fixes to the new shulker mobs. Their projectiles don't follow players in creative mode or spectator mode anymore, or so they claim, and shulkers have stopped teleporting automatically if you have set them to not have AI. Another teleportation related fix is that you can now teleport shulkers using the /TP and spread players commands. Another major change is to particles. Technically, particles are no longer entities, and what that means to you is that they are no longer as expensive in terms of memory and in terms of performance. Reddit user Yukon Apple Geek did some math on it and came to the conclusion that it is 163% faster than it used to be. Together with this, the limit of the amount of particles you can have at once has increased from about 4,000 to 16,384, and the default range, that is if you don't force the particles to be visible regardless of range, has been increased from 16 to 32. That is a very impressive performance increase, and that means that particles are now much more useful and versatile. We also got some small bug fixes. The arrowheads of potion arrows are no longer completely black. Command block minecarts and armor stands do not despawn anymore. They could in some of the snapshots previously randomly despawn when they weren't supposed to. Another quite fun bug is that when you place an end rod on top of an end rod, a log message would be printed to the Minecraft log that said HSL SDJK SDLK. so there's some obvious debug code left in my mistake, and that's been removed. Now let's move on into the end. Further work has been done on the Enderdragon Boss fight. Enderdragon fireballs now give off the Ender Acid fire effect, and they no longer light the ground on fire. The charge and knockback attack that the Enderdragon had in previous versions of Minecraft has been added back in, and the dragon is now much more dangerous, with the wings doing damage to players, which prevents you from easily attacking from the sides. The acid attack from the dragon when it's perched on top of the portal now has a much greater range. Once the dragon is done with that attack, it will always follow it up with a charge and knockback attack. In addition to that, if you're too far away when the acid attack is happening, the dragon will immediately abort the attack and go over to the charge. There's also another attempt at fixing a bug that was claimed to be fixed in a previous snapshot, and that is that the dragon could not be killed unless it was perched on top of the portal. Now that does indeed appear to be fixed, but with a weird side effect. The dragon will now fly over to the portal in sort of a zombie state while already dead, and then actually die at the portal. Other than the dragon, other news for the end is that the beacon in the floating ships that you could find near ant cities has now been removed. The beacon block is no longer there, it has been replaced by a pumpkin block. The iron blocks, however, are still to be found underneath as a base. Personally, I doubt that this will remain, and my guess is that the iron blocks and the pumpkin blocks are all going to disappear. For now though, that is a fairly abundant source of iron. Another cool change to the end ships is that they now have a figurehead, a dragon head, which means that the dragon head is now obtainable in survival. Interestingly enough, this dragon head is now easier and more abundant than normal mob heads. We will see if that remains the case as the snapshots develop. One section of changes remain through these snapshots, and that is the changes to command blocks, commands, and scoreboards. There are a lot of interesting new features in these snapshots, including one that I think was actually introduced in last week's snapshots, but nobody really noticed, and that is the new slot denominator, slot.weapon. That slot will always be the selected slot on the player's hotbar, which means that you now replace a player's selected item easily. Another major change is the Scoreboard player's tag command that has been added in 15w32b. You can use it like this: Scoreboard player's tag and a player, entity, name or selector, add, and then your tag name, followed by a data tag optionally. That will set a tag that you can use somewhat like a scoreboard, in that it tags the entity, and you can then use the tag target selector argument to find entities and players that share that tag. You can also use a not indicator in that tag selector to find entities that do not have that tag. Tags for players are saved with the player data, and tags for entity are saved with the entity data in the Minecraft region. That means that there is a vital difference between scoreboards and tags, in that tags only work with entities that exist and with players that are online. Another big difference is that since the tag is saved with the entity data, you can actually specify it in the entity data when you summon an entity, and that means that we now have the ability to tag entities from the very beginning, which reduces the need to rely on specific names, and that is a very good thing because these tags can never be faked. Also good to know is that there is a maximum amount of tags per entity, and that is 1024 currently. Another change to summoning entities is that you can now directly specify the team. If you use the team data value, the entity will be summoned directly onto that team you specify. Yet another change to summoning and spawning entities is that spawn eggs can now have an entity tag, just as armor stands could previously. This means that you can give a player a customized spawn egg that spawns an entity with a team or a tag already set, as well as any other attributes that you want. The TNT fuse animation has now been updated to reflect the actual state of the fuse countdown, which means that the fuse can now be manipulated from command blocks and the TNT will still work as it should. Finally, there are some new statistics and scoreboard objective types. One is the sneak time stat. which increases every tick that the player holds down the shift button. This means that you no longer have to rely on the player moving about in order to detect that the player is sneaking. That is an incredibly good addition. There are also 3 other scoreboard types that are not statistics. They are XP, air, and food. The air one is between 0 and 300 and shows how much air the player has left in his or her lungs. They will start at 300 and decrease if you go underwater and don't have water breathing. The food works similarly. It goes between 0 and 20, where 20 is full and 0 is starving. The final one is XP, and that is not actually a reflection of the player's actual XP, but rather the total score of the player, or the total accumulated XP since their last death. So it is important to know that this XP is exactly all the collected XP, but no reduction in XP, as the player uses up XP, as in enchanting, or combining items in an anvil. Some notable bugs still remain. Enchanted books that generate in dungeons are still completely blank and cannot be applied. And portals still have a tendency to eat entities rather than teleport them to the appropriate dimension. The worst consequence of this being that it is currently extremely hard to get a shulker from the end over to the overworld. Finally, there's still problems with raw JSON input, which is easily demonstrated by the simplest of possible tellraw commands. And of course, this is a snapshot, so that is to be expected. These are development versions. They are expected to have bugs and problems, and you should not load your worlds in them without a backup. So if you tried this snapshot, then do take a backup of your world or try it out on completely new test worlds. That said, if you do want this snapshot, then start up your launcher and create a new profile where you check the checkbox for Enable Experimental Development Versions, so-called snapshots. Then once you save that and start the game using that profile, you will be playing the latest snapshot version. Right now, that is 15w32c. This snapshot has been a preparation for more changes to come, especially since these are snapshots for the combat update and we are expecting melee combat changes coming in, including shields. So that will be exciting. I am sure that there are many small updates that I've missed in this, but I've tried to make a reasonable overview. If you want to know more of the changes that have been implemented in previous snapshots, then follow the cards on the screen right now, or check the video description for the links to the previous update videos. My name is slicedlime, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.